We are jumping right into it. I'm not going to waste any time today. Go ahead and start turning to Psalm chapter 25. We are making our way through this conversation of fear. Obviously, our worship and our everything is kind of focusing together and gearing together so that we are not only being immersed with the Word on the topic of fear, but in our worship we are confronting this whole thing of fear. And it's such a prevalent topic, whether we are talking about it or not. Fear is something that we wrestle with. I don't know the full scope of its reach, but I would even presume that since Friday of the shutdown with the government, that there are some who are struck with fear of what it looks like in the days ahead. My little bit of research shows that, I know that not everything comes to a halt, but there are some things that do. And I want to be mindful of that and sensitive to that. I don't want to be crass and just careless in my conversation. There are legitimacies in front of us that strike fear. They shouldn't, but we're human, so they do. Some of it could be relationally, some within the context of marriage, some within the context of parenting your kids and the challenges that you've got going on with those topics, with those individuals. It could be finances. So it's not hard for us to identify something in some aspect of our life that we have to fight against fear and worry rising to the surface. When we worry, really what happens is it completely alters our view on everything. It skews the view on everything. When you're worried about different things, when you have fear about different aspects of life, you even have conversations different than you normally do when you are living in the lane of confidence. So we're going to continue with this. I spent this past week going through Psalms, all of the different chapters in Psalm, and just highlighting all of the different mentionings of fear. I think it's safe to say that this man that wrote most of Psalms, he didn't write all of it, but he certainly knew fear. David knew fear. He has an early start on life where it seems like there's nothing that would hold him back. I mean, I've not killed a lion and a bear barehanded because I would be running. Those that know me well know that I have like an ongoing overcoming fear of dogs. It's not that I can't be in the same room. We used to own one, and so it's not that I'm like terrified of all dogs. Chihuahuas don't intimidate me. But whenever I see two big dogs fighting, my immediate response would be one of being paralyzed, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And I hope they don't see me and then turn on me kind of thing. And the movie Cujo and Werewolf, those kind of movies didn't do me any favors when I was a child. And so there are fears that we have in that regard. We have fears that need to be tackled. This chapter that we're going to get into, David, we're just going to look at 4 verses. And he mentions the word fear twice. And there's so much depth and richness into his understanding of fear. Now, the title of our series has been Happy New Fears, and we've been addressing typical fears, right? And some have even asked, so when are we going to get into the new ones? Well, these aren't even really new. It's just new if we rediscover them, or if we're discovering these for the first time. In a general sense, those of you that have been in church for a while, you know that you've heard these phrases, and you know the statement like to fear the Lord, right? And it almost becomes common, and we become used to it, where as with many other facets of our faith, it can lose its strength and its power in our life. David gets into this letter, or this certain chapter, chapter 25, And there's no indication as to what he's facing at the moment. But what we can get a sense of is that he has walked out some life, and he's wanting to write down some reminders so that he can hold on to them for maybe the next time in his life, or maybe for his children. I want you to hold on to these things. I want you to hold on to this understanding. So Psalm 25, we're just going to read verses 12 through 15, and it reads like this. Who is the man who fears the Lord? He, being the Lord, will show him the way he should choose. He will live a good life, and his descendants will inherit the land. The secret counsel of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he reveals his covenant to them. My eyes are always on the Lord, for he will pull my feet out of the net. This is towards the tail end of chapter 25, and he has said some other statements like, Lord, I turn to you. My God, I trust you. Don't let me be disgraced. Don't let my enemies gloat over me. No one who waits for you will be disgraced, but those who act treacherously, those ones will be disgraced. And so there's a whole bunch of other words that he's using to direct his heart and direct his... It's almost like if courage were a tangible piece of his life. He's grabbing confidence and directing its eyesight to God. Confidence, be reminded of where your confidence comes from. Now, confidence and trust and fearlessness don't happen accidentally. You are not born that way. There's all these different conversations in our life of like, you were born that way. No, there's some basics of how we were born. But we have to be taught this understanding of fear. Fearing the right things. And in this case, fearing the right one. That is the new fear for us. And maybe you might be one of those where it's like, I've heard this before. It's not new. Well, I would ask this question. Does that fear of him that you say you have, how much of that fear directs your life? Does it? Let me ask you this question. How confident are you in all aspects of life? Because your confidence in all aspects of life are directly related to your understanding of walking out in fear of the one who created you. We're going to pick this apart little by little, as we always do. These words in here are so, they unlock so much for us. Last week, let me set the stage for us. Last week, we ended with the question, what strikes fear in your life? I want you to bring that back to the center of your mind, and I want you to hold it right in front of our conversation today. Because what we are going to go through here in these next few moments will confront that thing or that person or that challenge that is striking fear in your life. Do you all have it? Do you have that right in your mind? Who is the man who fears the Lord? Yahweh. Yahweh is the word for fear in that line. Who is the man who fears the Lord? It's rhetorical. He's going to answer it on his own. But the man who fears the Lord gets this from the Lord. The Lord will show him the way he should choose. Now, we've got to be really intentional with grammar here in order for these words to carry the weight that they're supposed to have. Is there any question that God will respond? Is there any question of God's revealing? revealing of truth, revealing of wisdom, revealing of what path to take. Is there any question? The way I read it is, it says, He will. He will show. Fear provides us, I worded it this way, revelatory certainty. It is certain that God will reveal things to us when we walk a life of fear of Him. Not in like terror, but in awe and reverence. And so I would ask the question, I want to keep asking the question, do we really fear Him? Are we really reverent of Him? Because those who truly revere Him can walk with the confidence that He will reveal stuff to them. Yet so often in our life, our prayers are so wimpy because our ears are so wimpy. And we're like, God, I'm confronting this. My future is overwhelming. I've got all these, I've got a bookshelf in my mind of things that I would like to do, but my future, I just don't know what route to take. I don't know which path will get me to these things. And so I'm confused. And so I'm fearful of that. I'm lifting that up to you. But then almost instantly, we just think that He's not going to answer. And I'm even guilty of this, where it's almost like I've just left it too much up to chance. Just keep loving God, digging into the Word, and just loving and living for Him. And then you'll see, after you've lived enough life, you'll be able to see His work in your life. In these verses, He's much more proactive than just life happenstantially happening. So then we, after we've lived life, we can look back and be like, oh, God spoke to me. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I see David spelling out here is that we can live much more confident in his voice than that. Who is the man who fears the Lord? The Lord will show. No question. It begs us to answer, though, the question, do we really fear Him? And are we confident in this God that we revere, that He's really the God who speaks? Who is the man who fears the Lord? He will show him the way. Y'all, this three-letter word is so important. And this word matters to God. Do you know that your way matters to Him? Your way matters to Him. He speaks into your way. Once again, we just have a listening problem. But He cares about your way. This word has two simultaneously running definitions. He will show the way. Let me just make sure I'm reading it verbatim. He will show him the way. That is both direction and demeanor. What strikes fear in your life? God doesn't just want to show you the direction that you need to go with those things that strike fear in your life. He wants to show you the demeanor to walk in when you face those fears. That's crazy powerful. That confronts what I've coined as the region's chronic pessimism. It just confronts it. Because challenges that we face, we just have an interesting way of facing them in this area. It's like we just have Brown's syndrome. I'm just going to lose. I'm just going to lose in life. 0-16 is going to be my story. It's like that's how we approach the challenges in our life. As if there's this cloud looming over. Those who fear Him, He will show him the way. Now again, let's keep on this English track. He will show him the way he should choose. The reason why that's important is because he's not going to show us the way we should have chosen. So that tells me that he's showing us the way that we should choose as we are approaching it. Not after we've lived it. God's not just like, I can't wait to sit with you and just be like, what were you thinking? Here's how you should have handled that. Here's how you should have handled that conversation. Not only what you were supposed to say, but the way you were supposed to say it. No, see, I know that we have a listening problem. I know that I have a listening problem because beforehand, he's speaking to me not only of what the decisions are and what the direction is, but he's also showing me the demeanor to do it. It's not like God's got bad grammar. Fear me, and I'm going to show you how to done it. God is he's He works previous to things happening in our life. So I started thinking about that. I was like, well, demeanor, direction seems like it could be all over the place. And I could do the cop-out and be like, well, so long as I am directed towards Him, I can do no wrong. I think that, yeah, in general, but in your business, I genuinely believe that God is a God of the details. And I know I spoke to those that are entrepreneurs and dreamers, and maybe you're a business owner, you have employees. God cares about the way of all of those things. He cares about the future of your business. He cares about the future of your family. He cares about the future of your finances. He cares about all of it, and He cares about the way you go about it, your demeanor. That alone, we should just say amen and walk out of here and just mull on that. Because as I was preparing this, I was like, you know what? What business do I have of teaching on Happy New Fears when I find that my demeanor is super jacked up and I feel like I have chronic directional challenges because my thoughts and my mind are just it's not even like just horizontally speaking. I'm like, I've got this thing all over the place. So then that makes me think, man, do I really? Who is the man who fears the Lord? He will show that man the way he should choose. The reason I got frustrated at myself is because I find that I am way more reactionary to how I acted versus proactively thinking about and listening to how He would want me to approach X, Y, and Z. That's huge, y'all. Sometimes we think that God just reacts to things. No, He is proactive to our life. He will show the way He should choose. Revelatory certainty for those who fear God. Now that man who fears God, he will live a good life. That means as you go throughout life, your soul is full. That's a good life, to have a full soul. Is that you? Do you have a full soul? I'm fascinated by a recent movie, The Greatest Showman. I watched that a few weeks ago, like a week and a half ago. And I was just captivated by it, like the dreamer, imaginative, and just there's no limits to life kind of wheels started spinning in my mind. And not to like spoil this for anybody that hasn't seen it, but there's this great life that this man lives. He goes to great lengths to bring joy and smiles to people. But even in that good pursuit, he momentarily loses sight of what truly fills his soul. I think that God's best gifts to us that are soul fillers are within the walls of our own home. Those are his greatest gifts, and we treat them sometimes as if there's a return receipt. I think let me just say it this way. I remember on my wedding day saying, for better, for worse. I just didn't know that the degree of worse that I'm capable of would be given to Summer. I would rather give it to my enemy. You know what I'm saying? And so I have the potential of treating the greatest gift that God has given me kind of like, And I want to live that way. And now Summer would, she'd have her own statements on that, and I'm a work in progress, but I begin to see that it doesn't matter where I go or what experiences I have. It doesn't matter how many roller coaster rides I ride at wow, the name just flew out of my head. Cedar Point. We live right here by it. Okay. Cedar Point, or going to some crazy place. Like I fear going to visit Idaho and Montana because I think it's so picturesque out there that I just might want to stay. But I would bet you that even if I went and visited there, there's no soul-filling anything the way that my own home and those within it fill my soul. He will live a good life. That's the kind of good life I want to live. I want my children, when I'm old and crusty and dusty, to be like, man, my dad, he wasn't perfect. But I know, and this might be awkward for them to say this, but I know that I filled his soul. I know that I was his joy. All right, let's keep moving. He will live a good life, and his descendants will inherit the land. Those that fear the Lord have a promised, ongoing presence with their family on this planet. Is that a weird way to say that? That means that there's a promise of future for your family. You may not be here anymore, but your blood is still pumping through the veins of somebody who's in your family. There's promise of your descendants still living here. An inheritance, and to inherit the land basically means to occupy. Y'all remember a few years ago, it's like 6 or 7 years ago now, the whole thing on Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street. And these people just showed up and they just put tents in New York City. And I remember walking by it and be like, this is like so random, just to see tents in the middle of New York. Occupy Wall Street. A church in New York grabbed that slogan, and with the mindset of Christ in their life, they said, occupy all streets. I don't think that we fully grasp the significance and the purpose of the fact that we walk this place right now. I don't know that we occupy our space very well sometimes. There's a purpose for you taking air in and out. There's a purpose for you being here. I believe that those who fear the Lord understand that and they live that out. They walk that out. Not afraid of anything that anybody would ever say about them. but you're just about your life, letting the love of Christ flow through you to others who are undeserving of it in the same way that you are undeserving of it, and you don't stop because somebody gives you a disgruntled look of like, why would you go there? How don't you belong to, you're in church, I can't believe you would go there. You don't pay a bit of attention to those looks, you just keep fulfilling your purpose. That's what it means to occupy the land, to inherit the land. Again, I want my children to understand that there's a reason why they're breathing. There's a plan and a purpose for their life. Here's where it's intimidating as a parent. And every parent in here, you're probably going to shake your head. It is our responsibility to help our children discover why they were born. Yeah, I understand God has His way of speaking and whatnot, but it's the parents' responsibility to help in that process of discovery. How you doing with that? I'll just ask that question and move right along. This next one is really challenging. It's actually not challenging as much as it is, the meaning of this is just crazy. The secret counsel of the Lord is for those who fear Him, and He reveals His covenant to them. Does that make anybody else feel awkward or strange? That there is secret counsel that the Lord has that He gives to those who fear Him. There's what's known in a general sense, and then there's what's secret. See, I think that there's just a massive group of people that don't even know the general counsel of God, let alone secret counsel. Now, some translations might say the Lord confides in those who fear Him. Doesn't lose its meaning. It's still the same thing, the secret counsel. The secret counsel He shares with those who fear Him. Secret counsel is this imagery. I didn't have enough time to ask Leslie if I could borrow her couch. Pastor Leslie has a couch in her office. Secret counsel is the imagery of a couch. Now I'm going to let us use our imagination. And this is a really tiny love seat, okay? It's a couch. The secret counsel of the Lord is a couch. So, Summer and I have not had everybody in this room over to our house yet. Fact. But those who have come to our house, we eventually migrate or make our way into our living room. We've got this ridiculously oversized sectional in our living room. And I was just thinking about different families that we've had over. And normally what happens is we have girls that like to use their imagination, and they put on dress-up clothes and put on plays and sing-alongs and all that kind of stuff in our room as entertainment. But then there's almost inevitably, there's a moment or a section of time where we just share life with those that are over at our home. I think that's what God does when we choose to sit in His love seat. And I think the love seat it's a whole different meaning for love seat when you're sitting in God's love seat. He just wants to love on you. and he wants to share life. He wants to share his life. He doesn't borrow it or grab it from anybody else. He wants to share of himself. Our challenge is we didn't even know the couch existed, or we don't want it, or we're too busy freaking out over life that we think that our wisdom is better than his wisdom, and our life is busier than his life, and all this kind of stuff. And so we find ways of talking ourselves out of even getting in the seat. As you continue to dig into the meaning of it, it says this about the word, that it's familiar conversation. The secret counsel of the Lord, the familiar conversations from him are for those who fear him. So, if we read the second half of that verse, while we're sitting on that couch in reverence, he reveals his covenant to them. That is paramount to this fear conversation. Because if we truly understand his covenant, we won't fear. And it requires us, because we're human, it requires us to sit on his couch. And this is the thing that's so challenging as I've walked this out with God, is he's God Almighty who created all things. And yet Jesus teaches us to pray to God Almighty by saying, "Hey, Dad in heaven." Is that strange for anybody else? Like you could sneeze and kill me. And yet you want me to be as familiar with you as family and have familiar conversation with me. You see, let me share what I don't want. I don't want to be a Christian who is only familiar with the Bible, but have not allowed it to penetrate my heart. I might be able to cite a lot of the Bible, but it doesn't mean that my dad in heaven has spoken those words into me. Does that make sense? I'm trying to word that in the right way because I've seen a lot of people throughout the course of my life who know the Bible better than me, but they are no more the image of Christ than somebody that doesn't have Christ in their life. And I think that we become the children of God that he wants us to become when we sit on his couch. Can I push pause just for a second and explain why we do Lectio Divina? The reason why we do it is because it's not just reading and journaling on the Bible. The reason why we do Lectio Divina is because there's this added step of silence and resting in what he has spoken to us. I think that our culture makes it really challenging for us to sit in God's presence. We live in a grab-and-go culture. If you want to know it, Google it. What's the meaning of life? Google it. You could just write down a jumbled up section of words that you're trying to find in the Bible, and Google will help you find it. So any of us can become an expert at anything within 15 minutes. Research scuba diving, become an expert in 15 minutes. You see, there is no Googling or an instructional YouTube video that within 15 minutes will cause you to bear the image of Christ. that takes time. That requires couch sessions with your dad in heaven. See, I've seen a lot of people that know a lot about the Bible, but they don't carry the image of Christ. You know somebody understands covenant when they face challenges fearlessly. And they don't just face those challenges fearlessly, but there's also a certain demeanor in which they face them. Who is the man who fears the Lord? He will show him the demeanor and the direction that he should choose. We got to sit on the couch with him. Now there's something else that he spells out for us, a guarantee, another guarantee in life. Because we have to understand that in a general sense that we live in a broken world, right? We live in a broken world. This next thought goes against my wiring. I'm an optimist, and I think the best of most people, not all people, but most people. And so what David guarantees at the end here, my eyes are always on the Lord, for he will pull my feet out of the net. The word pull, by the way, some of y'all might like this one. The Hebrew word for pull is yatsa. Yatsa! He's got me. Okay. Well, what's the guarantee that he gives us is this. My eyes are perpetually on the Lord, for he will pull my feet out of the net. So, if our eyes are perpetually on him for the purpose of him pulling our feet out of the net, that must also mean that we have perpetual nets that we are going to be walking in. And the reason why this is a challenge for me at being an optimist is because I want to believe that everybody out there in the world isn't out to get me. I sleep at night because I know that nobody's creeping around my window looking for an opportunity to take my life. Now, that may not be the reality for some, and for those watching online, you might be watching online because you can't go out in public. I have no idea. I don't know what your life is. But there's the guarantee that we're going to have nets that we walk in. I think that those nets can either be by other people, or those nets can also be by our own sin. Net, in its original meaning, is this: leaders who bring people to sin. So this is about people setting a net for our feet. And I think they're a little bit more inconspicuous than somebody dressed in all black with a face mask on. I would presume that there's this whole industry of net casting as it pertains to like credit cards and going into debt and all this kind of stuff. If we're not careful, debt can be a net. Your health, like basically anything that gets pushed, anything that's commercialized. Keeping up with the Joneses. Anybody remember that phrase? That's a net. I want to show something. I asked Hannah if she would be okay with this, and this is the imagery that comes to my mind. So Hannah, can you come up here for a second? This is Hannah. Some people don't like the way I word it. Just get over it, but she belongs to me. She's my child. She's one of two of our gifts in our home. I think one of the realities of life that I'm not going to look forward to are the nets that are set for her feet. As a dad, I would presume for those of you that have walked this out and your children are raised up already and you've seen them walk through some challenges, you've made it, you survived it. There's probably going to be some more nets. I mean, the Bible is pretty clear. David's pretty clear right here. There's always more nets. So go ahead and walk through. They're just stand in the middle of this. Now, I don't have this rigged up, obviously. There's not like some kind of spring-loaded anything, but there's this net that we can get caught in and tangled in. Go ahead and kind of step through here. Bring this foot through. I just don't want to trip you. Okay. And we can just walk through life, and we can get caught up in nets. This could even be, I don't know, what the other girls say about my hair at school. Comparing myself with my friends or the other girls in school, that's a net. The pursuit of excellence in education. I believe in education, okay? I earned a degree last year. I get it. But I don't want her pursuit of that to rob the joy of learning either. So the potential for nets for our feet and ourselves are limitless. Now, David writes it this way. Hannah is going to play the part of David. Okay, and we rehearsed this a little bit. David says this, "My eyes are always on the Lord, for he pulls my feet out of the net." The reason why I think this is significant in the way that he says this, especially with the understanding that net means leaders who bring people to sin. I'm going to have a really hard time when somebody introduces her to a thought of the way things are. It's going to be a really big challenge for me because that leader is bringing her to a place of questioning or doubting or maybe even sin. Demonstrating restraint will be key for me. And I will need to have my eyes on my dad so that he can show me the direction and the demeanor. So, my eyes, Hannah, a.k.a. David, or David, a.k.a. Hannah, my eyes are always on my dad. This is why this is important. Because there are going to be things that people say to you that are not truth. They're going to say it as if it is truth. They're even going to bring all kinds of research and all kinds of opinions. And they're going to try to convince you that something is truth. They're going to try to convince you of your worth. But as you look at me as your dad, I want you to be reminded that you are precious, that you were wonderfully and fearfully made. That in the same way that you are a gift to me, I know that you are a gift to others. And he has gifted you. He has uniquely gifted you. My dad in heaven has uniquely gifted you through creativity, through drawing. Look at me. And no man, until you're old enough, is ever going to love you the way I love you. You can count on it. And I don't care what nets get thrown for you, this is what I'm going to do throughout the course of your life. Is I'm going to do my best to look you eye to eye and share your worth and untangle your feet so that you can run and live the life that you've been called to live. Period. Keep looking at me. Lift your foot up. All right? Love you. We have to do that same thing with our dad. With our dad in heaven. Feet are going to find nets. There are going to be statements made of, there's going to be statements made, I'm going to be really general on purpose. There will be statements made over your life that serve one purpose, and that's to cause you to fear or doubt or not believe in the one that created you. What you have to do as a child of the living God is always have your eyes on the Lord as He yatzas your feet from the net. Eyes, physical, mental, spiritual. A lot of layers to our eyes. They are always set on the Lord. Who fears the Lord? Who is the man who fears the Lord? The Lord will show him the way he should choose. Grab your connection card this morning. This one is in conjunction with last week. Last week, what strikes fear in your life? This week, how would you describe your demeanor?